Hello, my name is Chris Blask. I'm the VP of Strategy with Cybeats, and with me today is Jack Daniel. And Jack has been in this industry and helping keep the community together in many ways. We'll let Jack expand on it as much as he wants to, and the conversation dictates. But hey, Jack, how are you doing? Thanks for coming along.
Hey, Chris, it's great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm doing great. I'm on a couple week solo meander cross country, just wandering, and then I'll get back home in time to watch the waves come in at the house in Georgia. So, but at least it's a house, not a boat. But
Yeah, people were talking. So we do in the green room. We're talking about a couple of things, and shared that I'm in Melbourne, Florida, and Jack's house is north of me along the coast, and we're all going to deal with a hurricane of sorts over the next week or so. And both those topics, right? The meander you're on, the sea voyage I've been on, in the context of where we are in time, and yes, the pandemic, but also not just that, right? As I rotate around the day job stuff that I do, right? And why are we doing supply chain security now? Because, what does that have to do with threat intelligence? Because it's all related. It's all one big thing, right? It's a long process that goes a long way. And there's fatigue, in the industry, right? People are, I've always, quite often say I'm sort of the young guy of the old folks, right? I came along, you and a lot of my friends, were ahead of me, and I've been tagging along in the back, but even I've been at it a long, long time, right? And there's this intrinsic weariness, for all sorts of reasons people have, right? But and I think looking, through these, this is episode 31, right? And there's been a lot of conversations about these same topics, right? Looking back and where we are right now, looking forward on transparency, on truth, honesty. Is it a technical thing? Is it a business thing? Does it work? Are we going to win this, right? So as we were just talking, I'd like to, if Anthony, you could roll that first question, right? It's looking back, right? The early security community, you've been, a orchestrator, organizer, bringing people together and getting us all talking and whatnot. How, what are your thoughts on the beginning? Good were we at that? How we believe, and how have we done?
I there's good and bad. So for just a little background, when I first got into dealing with technology, it was accidental. There was a void and I filled it at work. And if you did that back in the 90s, you learned about security, whether you wanted to or not. And if you had an aptitude for it, well, here I am. But I had no resources, and I found a couple of local user groups that were really welcoming and helped me figure things out. And people would take time to talk to me, and some of the presentations that weren't just sales pitches were pretty informative. And so as soon as I would learn something new about, whatever version of Exchange was in the back room, I'd go to one of the meetings and I'd share it. And I realized that that's how we move forward, right? There are people that are discovering things that you and I may have discovered 20 years ago, but they bring a new perspective to it. And it's always worth listening to them. And that's what's driven me forward to be engaged with community and doing, eventually start giving some short talks and then longer talks and then attending more and more events. And then when there was a bit of a void and we decided to give a platform to some people in Las Vegas in summer of 2009, we didn't think we were doing anything other than getting several dozen people together and share some information. But B-Sides came out of that. And I think that things like B-Sides, things like the local DEF CON groups, things like the various meetups around the world are continuing a tradition of sharing information. And I think that part of it, those community-centric things, whether it's ShmooCon or 44Con or a whole bunch of other really community-centric events. I think that has brought the best of us putting our heads together in the early days and sharing what we knew. The competition, the commercialization, and the political climate globally of absolute polarization pushes us in the other direction. Polarization, political and social views, and to a certain extent, religious views, because they've all become smashed together. So it's a mixed bag. And I think that it becomes really obvious if you connect with people. It becomes very obvious quickly if they are having fun and want to share what they know. And then, you get to my place in the world where it's like, I don't know anything anymore, but I know some people and I love connecting to people. And I love helping support things like B-sides or other, movements that help move people forward. And so it's a real mixed bag. I think the diversity of platforms that we use from Reddit to Twitter to Facebook to LinkedIn to whatever does create some silos, but a lot of folks, a lot of us are bouncing across all of them. But overall, I think we're I'm a very pessimistic optimist. I think we have a lot of hurdles to overcome, but I think there are so many good people trying to make the world a better place, whether that's in our space commercially or in everything else. It's a mess out there, but let's channel Mr. Rogers. Look for the helpers; they're out there,
and they are, right. And then I've always framed this whole debate between, we call it democracy or authoritarianism. It's very simple. And I think you and I agree that people are decent enough to figure it out themselves, given the right sort of freedoms and structure and so forth. But maybe we're wrong. We have to have big meaning people tell us what to do, and even our little space in cybersecurity, tell us what we're going to use and tell us this standards, and not have all this debate and so forth. I just don't think that's true. And and Anthony, if you can roll that other one, the second question, because that leads right into where you were going, which leads right into the present now. Can we talk? Right? I use myself as a guinea pig, like I think most of us do, right? I find myself doing things a lot. It's like, I'll bet I'm not the only one, right? And you touched on this. I have so many. There's a joke I use all the time. I have so many channels to communicate. I can barely talk at all, right?
Yeah.
And it's literally just finding the bloody messages, much less knowing where to have a good conversation and actually achieve something. And we're all familiar with social media, right? It's personally a big issue for me, right? I think there's a lot of value there. My Facebook, and where you and I and a lot of people are connected there. For my part, I moderate and curate that space. I am not so open-minded my brains fall out. I want to have conversations with people that I value in the time that I have, that we can do it. And so, right, it's a dog's breakfast, right? We can talk really, really well. We can do this. I'm on a boat, for God's sakes, and you're somewhere out in the desert and near Las Vegas. But it bends right to the careers we've had. Security, right? As we know, there are threat actors running campaigns as weapons, just like joke or not, the Good Times virus. Back in the Usenet days, it wasn't a virus; it was just an email that said, "Tell your friends there's a virus," and everybody did. Because they're all decent, they're good right. Folks. And now we have well-funded nation-state massive campaigns to specifically take this, just the temporal characteristics of our time. We just happen to be at the point in social media that we have all these different channels. We happen to be at this point, the opportunity, as it always, in adversarial, hacking situations, attackers are working on it. So can we talk right now? How, take it wherever you want with this, socio-politically or technically or in cybersecurity, are we speaking now? And again, I guess, as you know, we're looking back, looking forward, present, looking future. So in this part of it, we're kind of looking where we are. Is there a path out?
Yeah, let's turn the question upside down. Is anybody listening? Because one of the things with social media is, as you said, if you curate and have focus on conversations, that's great. But when you step in, there's so much noise, and so much of it is just broadcast, if you will, that it makes it hard to have a conversation. The signal to noise ratio is really, really bad. But I think we can. But you nailed some of the problems. Like, where do we go to have this conversation, right? I'm on Facebook because not because I like Facebook or I'm a fan of Zuckerberg. But there are people and groups there that's a way that I can connect with them. I remain on Twitter, even though it has been turned into a mess by, even though I don't follow them, as soon as we got all of the politicians and journalists and celebrities on there, a lot of people joined and just add to the background noise. And so you have to curate your list. And this one's on me specifically because I've had jobs with a community focus, sometimes with that word in the title, sometimes without. I've been product manager and things like that at times, but I've always been engaged for the past 15 plus years. I've been on Twitter since about a year after it started. And I've always been really open with connections on LinkedIn, on Facebook, because I'm the face of B-Sides, and was the face of Astaro pre-acquisition, and I was one of the public faces at Tenable for the 11 years I was there. And so I was really open with the connection. And now that I have stepped back and I've retired and I'm focusing on just sort of admin and cheerleading for B-Sides, and then working on my history project, The Shoulders of InfoSec, and occasionally podcasting, but Dave's in startup land and I'm retired. So, I have a really noisy mess. And for folks that have done that like I have, it's very hard to have conversations because you spend so much time filtering out the garbage. If you've done what you've done, I think it's easier. But then you always wonder what you're missing if you are highly selective. So how's that for a non-answer? It's out there.
It's epic, frankly. It makes me want to weave three things together because Mark Weatherford was on one of these shows, and just the other day we posted a clip from that. And he's talking about the question was, is there too much information? And he had a great rant. This is the quietest day. This is the slowest day we're ever going to have. Right? There's more information, and not just more information, but more information about the information and so forth. Right.
Yep.
And on the technical, I want to tie in the technical side of things. They've been making this argument in the supply chain world, particularly, but again, like the technical details don't matter. It's that there's a number of the same things. There's a huge amount of information that needs to move. It needs to move in the right sort of times. All right, so let me restart on the technical side. So on the technical side, they've been making this argument in the supply chain world and so forth for a while that we have functional, structural, security, operational, business processes and economic processes that are forcing us to test out these philosophies. I need to tell you, I could, just as of today, right? Tom Ulrich, has been leading a naming issue group with a bunch of great folks. And we had a call earlier today, and we're talking through these things. And we need to be able to say that this piece of software is really probably from Jack Daniel and his company and so forth to a level appropriate for what the heck I'm doing right now, and put that together with everything else, and have that software bill of material for the current fascination of software inventory, and put that together with all these other things. Need to be true enough. Right. And I know it's the kind of thing that drives technical and business people nuts. But as you stare into this really closely, and I really have the last couple of years, much less, like all of us who are in our careers, this is how we do it anyways. The community management is trusting people enough. They trust you enough. You trust them enough. It's never about guaranteeing we're not going to fix this in space. So Anthony, if you could run that next question, right? Does the music stop? Does it stop? Right? It's cliche for us in the technical world, to be a little bit, pessimistic. But I think it's sort of a binary thing over long periods of time. For the next 100 years, 1,000 years, next couple of centuries, this is going to work out one way or the other. These technical infrastructures will work or not, because in large part they can be true enough to actually work. And I think that to layer in, I think what I meant to add to that is everything we're talking about in the human level, disinformation and so forth. It's the same thing. The same mechanisms work the same sort of way, right? And the same reason that you could start, and B-Sides with the help of a community that's turned into this huge thing. It's the same reason. We all want it.
Yeah,
So
I think that
if that
you know
wasn't
there.
too meandering,
No,
what do you
no.
think? You optimistic or pessimistic for the short and near term future of community
I am.
and
Good
openness?
question. Yeah, optimistic. I am slightly optimistic. I actually think that the polarization and politicization of everything is a toxin that is contaminating our entire world, including technology. That said, there are improvements being made, but we have a fundamental issue as far as solving security problems, and that issue is that we have to fix what's broken today. And if we can't fix it because we didn't write the code or we acquired the code, we have to put wrappers around it of some sort. That's what the entire security industry is, or almost the entire security industry is bandaging software that has issues. And we're not going to get away from that. But I think there is hope in things like there's less and less raw C, C++, code out there. People are using frameworks. The computing power has gotten so powerful that we can take the overhead of a variety of tools and frameworks, and it gets better. Isolation in browsers. If you go back a few years and think about things like all of the cross-site behaviors, they're not gone, but you can. There's a ton of isolation and insulation built in, and there are systems that are, whether it's Chromebooks or iPads, it's, certain tablets. They're things that just can't do some of the bad things, or not as easily. So there's hope there. I think that the SBOM conversation is important. It's but to something that you touched on before, we have a problem with absolutism. A lot of people, and I think it tends to be people newer in their careers, but not always. I think it also tends to be people who work on the offensive side more and have not spent time just trying to keep the stupid computers running, to be more absolute, striving for perfection. And it's, man, good enough is good enough. And, we tend to be perfectionists ourselves too. And so we have to remind ourselves of that. But I think there's room for optimism. I think we're going to continue to have challenges. I mean, you talked about it. It used to be just, hacking for fun. But now we've got land war in Europe, and the hacking, cybercrime that's going on with that is of stunning scale, and the collateral damage is everywhere, right? We have nation states and other actors who finance themselves. I mean, North Korea, we don't know how much, but North Korea funds a lot of North Korea from online crime. And then, we've always had con men. So, the crypto space, the cryptocurrency space, and that has been rife with crime and pyramid schemes and other terrible things. And so there's a lot of badness out there, but I think it was Marcus Ranum who said years ago, yeah, it's completely broken and it'll stay just broken enough to work. I'm paraphrasing, but that's where we are. If it stops working, right? If the attackers turn off the internet, then they can't take any more money from us. If software gets so bad that we can't use it, people are going to maybe change. Although there's some examples of that people won't give up, even though it's the worst stuff on the planet. And I'll spare your corporate overlords having a fit, so I won't name it. But, if anybody travels for work, you already know what I'm thinking. So, yeah, that's another rambling answer. But I think there's room for, I don't think we ever fix this, though. It's one of the things about the history of our industry. If you go back to the Ware report, and the Anderson report, and the RISOS, the Research and Secure Operating Systems reports, we're talking late 60s to mid to late 70s, and you look at the lessons we've learned from them, we've moved a lot of the problems out of the OS, but we've moved them into applications and into the browser. But progress is being made. But we're never actually going to fix all of this. But I think we're going to stay at good enough, or creep towards good enough, and try to stay on top of it.
Well, there's so much inside that, and I know we're sort of at time, but I'll leave you with a B-sides Las Vegas story that speaks to a lot of this. Remember, Dylan Beresford, gave the talk there that he'd not given earlier about hacking a PLC, and he was about to give his talk, and his laptop wouldn't work for the projector. So I ran outside and I left one by the pool at the hotel, and there was 4 people sitting around the table. I grabbed it and it was open, wide open, turned on, and so forth. I grabbed it and ran back in, and one of the folks said, "Stop! I have to ask, was that a test?" Right? And I just smiled, of course, but the answer is yes, right? And that sort of thing sticks with me, gives me optimism, because at the end of the day, these human mechanisms are what we're building the technical mechanisms for, and inside those, humans are generally decent. Right?
Yep. Oh yeah. The B-sides Vegas. I forget what happened, but the laptop I was going to run at the pool party, we usually have a rolling slideshow of pictures of B-sides, B-sides events around the world, some sponsor logos and things like that rolling. And my disposable laptop, we had to use it for something else. So I ended up having my main bread and butter laptop unlocked, running that loop. And, I'd glance over every now and then. I'd be like, is this? And, for 4 or 5 hours, people are standing there, and around the corner from the open bar is the laptop I rely on. I mean, I did back it up first just in case, but it was, nothing. It's like, we're here to share and have a good time. And, that's kind of amazing.
Yep. So are you. Well, thank you, Jack. This has been fantastic. We're looking forward to this conversation, and looking forward to having more of them.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me on. Hope the hurricane fizzles out. I hope our friends in Puerto Rico recover from this last one and don't get slammed again, although this one looks like a different course. But it's still hurricane season. Be safe out there, Chris, and we'll be in touch online. Again, thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.